All right, so this week we're going to look at Tehilim Perek Chaf. So this is the kapitel that we say in between Ashrei and Uvalat Zion. In the last couple of days, there were Rosh Chodesh, we didn't say it. So today we start saying it again. And we looked at this or talked a little bit about it in a previous Chabura. And I brought in that source just to refresh our memories, right? So we talked about this, and we were asking, why do we say Lamnatzech Mizmor LeDavid after we say, after we finish our Shemona Esrei, we go into Tachanun and then Ashrei, Lamnatzech, and then Uvalat Zion. And the Medrash tells us, why do we say it? The Medrash says, Amar of Shimon Bar Abba. There's other opinions. I'm just quoting what seems to be the opinion that sort of brings it into Shachris where it is. Amar of Shimon Bar Abba, Atamotze Yudches Mizmore Merosh HaSefer Ad HaPosuk Hazeh. And it's interesting. So we see in a couple of references by Chazal, they say that there are 18 mizmarim or prakim or kpitlach, before our parak that we're talking about, even though we have 19. So it could be that there's a different count, that maybe one of the kpitlach was sort of broken into two. Not sure exactly how that count worked, but it says that there are 18 mizmarim before this. Merosha Sefer Ad HaPosuk Hazeh Keneged Yudches Brachos Kasher Mispalel Yudches Brachos Hein Omrim Lo. So remember, we saw that after you davened, someone would, your friend was supposed to come up to you, and after you davened your Shemona Esrei, they would say that your prayer should be answered. And because of that idea, that we also say this kapitel after you finish your Shemona Esrei, because it says Yancha Hashem b'yom tzara, that Hashem should answer you in your time of stress or distress. So that's why we do it. And it's interesting that we brought this up before as well, is that the full what we call the full Kaddish that we always do after a Shemona Esrei includes the line Tiska Batzlo Son, right? That our prayers, Uva Oson, our prayers and our bakashos should be accepted, and that seems to be in line with this idea of Tisanet Lo Secho, that our prayers should be answered. So that's what we learned last summer, but this time today I wanted to dive a little bit deeper, just understanding what is this Perek of Tehilim about. Interestingly, there's a lot of the prakim, I certainly can't say all, but certainly a lot of the prakim of Tehilim that we have, there's sometimes a story behind them. Like in this case, what was David HaMelech, what was going on that he wrote, this kapitel at this time of his life, like what was going on. So I guess we'll start by just looking at the kapitel quickly, and then we'll look at the Rashi and the Radak to get some of that background. So, right, so the Perek starts, Yancha Hashem b'yom tzara, that Hashem should answer you. He should answer you in the time of your distress. So it's interesting that David is talking about in the second person, not the third person. And then Yisagevcha Shem Elokei Yaakov. And interestingly, another interesting point that we'll see is that we say that Hashem is the one who will strengthen us, who will uplift us. But when we mention, or when we refer to Hashem here, we're talking about Elokei Yaakov and not Avram or Yitzchak. So we'll have to see what's going on there. Yishlach Ezocha Mikodesh Mitsuni Sadeko, and it sounds like from this pasuk and even the next one, Yizkor Kol Min Chosecha V'Olasecha Yedash Sela. These all seem to be a reference to korbanos that we are answered because of korbanos that we bring, and we'll see that I think that's the Radak explains it otherwise. But that's when you just look at the psukim, it seems like from the Kodesh, meaning from the Beis Hamikdash, the minchas that we're talking about, the olas that we bring, that they're fattened, yidashna. So we'll have to see what that means. And then Nirana Rabbi Shua Secho V'Shem Elokinu Nigdo Yemali Hashem kol mishalosecha. Then we will rejoice in Hashem saving and you in your saving us. And we are made greater in the Shem Hashem Nigdo. Again, we'll have to understand what that means exactly. But that's when Hashem fulfills everything that we ask for. So once that happens and Hashem answers our prayers, Ata Yadati, now I know, Ki Hoshia Hashem Meshicha Yenu Bishmei Kadsha Bigros Yemino, and now I know that this is Hashem saving us, and that sort of goes right into the next pasuk. Now others, right, meaning that others, other nations are going to put all of their trust in their military might, maybe their political might, their technological might. But we, right, we put all of our faith in Hashem. Then Hema Karuv and Afalo, right, they have all faltered. But we are standing upright and we are strengthened. Hashem saves us. The Melech answers us when we call out to him. Okay, so back to that original question, like what is going on? What was the background story for David Melech on this? So for that, we'll look at Rashi. And Rashi says, Yan Hashem b'yom Sarah. Says a mizmer hazeh Hashem shahaya sholeches Yoav as kol Yisrael lemilchama v'hu haya omed b'Yerushalayim u'mispal aleihem. So this is going back to, so David Melech is sending out his army under the command of Yoav, and the pasuk in or the psukim in Shmuel Beis, where this happens is they say to him, Tov ki tihi alenu meir. David Melech wants to go into battle himself. We know that David Melech certainly in his younger years was a fierce combatant, right? He was a warrior, but here they tell him, no, Tov ki tihi alenu meir. You should stay in Yerushalayim Lazor to help us. Va'amru Rabbeinu, and he does. And David Melech stays back. He sends Yoav to go fight Avshalom, his own son, right? Who's trying to take over his throne. He stays back to daven, and the Chazal say over there, Amar Rabbeinu, Yomale David lo asa Yoav melchama. And the Chazal say that if David had not stayed back in order to daven for them on their behalf, Yoav wouldn't have gone to battle. But so that's the backstory here, is that David Melech is sitting in Yerushalayim and he's davening on behalf of his army that they should be successful, in fighting all the forces that have aligned themselves with Avshalom. And that's when
Short question.
Yeah.
Does Rashi comment on the entire Tehilim?
Yeah, there's a Rashi throughout Tehilim. Right. So and maybe that answers why it says Yancha Hashem, that Hashem will answer you, right? Because he's davening on behalf of the army, so maybe that's why it's in the second person. So let's see. Let's go a little bit weiter in Rashi. And Rashi says Shem Elokei Yaakov. So why? So our question before, why specifically Yaakov and not Avram and Yitzchak? Shevtichu belechta lechara, because this is specifically going back to when Yaakov leaves the house of Yitzchak and Rivka to go to Haran, that Hashem gave him a promise, right? That he's going to stay with him before he gets to Lavan's house. He gives him all those promises. So Rashi seems to be saying that it's because that Hashem is, this is that midah that we're going off of, is that Hashem is trustworthy, right, to keep his promises. That Hashem is always going to keep Bnei Yisrael intact, and therefore that's, when we think about davening for the army, that's that's really the fate of Bnei Yisrael as a whole. So that's Rashi says that's why it's Shem Elokei Yaakov, specifically Yaakov. So Mincha Zecha, we asked the question before, like does this mean that David Melech was giving karbanos? Like what was he doing in Yerushalayim? So Rashi says no, it's Heim Hatfilos Shatem Mispalim B'Mechama. Now these are really the prayers, and it sounds like it's not just prayers, but also the prayers of his, from his army, of those people in the army who are also probably davening before they go into battle. That Hashem hears all of those, and we call those minchosecha v'olasecha. And then, so what does it mean? Yidashna sela. It's like lashon shuman, right? That you're giving, sort of the fattened animal up as a korban. That you should accept our davening in the same way, in the same ratzon, like as if this was an ola. Okay. And then Rashi says, that we are going to be happy with, after our prayers are answered. So I think Rashi, I'm not sure if he's adding much, but he's explaining what does that mean. Like there's a lot in those two words that we then rejoice in the Yeshua. Okay, and then we say, after we're saved, Atayadati Zuhi Haranana Sheneranin Ata B'Tshua Zushabal Yov Yisrael. So this is what they were happy about, right? When Yov and Yisrael, after they were victorious. Yadati Shechav Samakum Bi. So David, it sounds like David HaMelech is saying, I know that you chose me, right? You still, desire me to be the Melech, to be in charge of Bnei Yisrael. Because their shua, the fact that you saved the army of Kadosh Baruch Hu, that's also that you saved me as well. Okay. And then Ele Berechav, we said this is right. They have their faith in their power, where it comes from, but we have our faith in Hashem. Okay. So that's Rashi giving us again that sort of backstory as to what was going on in this kapitel that we say every morning, or at least most mornings. So let's take a look at the Radak. He sort of adds in. I did bring in all the Radaks, and there's some points I think the Radak may not agree with Rashi, but we're just going to look at a couple of Radaks where he's giving us a little bit more of an insight as well. So here the Radak says Yisagevcha, that Hashem. Just going back up real quick. So the word is, so it says Hashem will answer us in the time of our distress. Yisagevcha, he sort of uplifts us, or he strengthens us. What does that mean exactly? So the Radak says, Ki Ezra he kemigdo uz. It's like a tower, like a citadel, like that gives us that sort of protection. So the enemy cannot come. So that's what Hashem is. Hashem, we're saying, is Hashem, you are our fortress, right, that protects us. Again, just understanding specifically what the words are. That's a lot of the challenge of Tehilim, is just understanding what are these words and how do we interpret them in the context. Okay, and then Shem Elokei Yaakov. So this is another point that we're struggling on. So let's see what the Radak says. It says, Amar Elokei Yaakov Lafisha Sharai Yaakov Atzma Betzaros Yosef Avram Yitzchak. He says Yaakov had more tzaros than Avram and Yitzchak did. Okay, number Bidrash Elokei Abraham Elokei Yitzchak Ein Ksiv Kam Ela Elokei Yaakov. Right, the Midrash picks up in this. The Shocher Tov says V'Amar Reish Lakish Mashal Isha Ubra Shahaisa Mashal Ledus Amrin Lei La Leis Anin Yadan Ma Nemer Lech Ela Man Anila Imach Beidan Kshusa Yani Yosich B'Kshusech. So the Reish Lakish says it's a mashal. It's a mashal to the woman who's giving birth, and she's having difficulty. And so those around her say, I don't know what to tell you, but I can tell you that the one who answered your mother's prayers when she was in distress is going to be the same one who answers your troubles as you're in distress in your childbirth, right? Meaning that why Yaakov specifically? Because Yaakov is really the one who he himself was in this situation. So he himself is that representative of that idea of that he was davening for a very similar thing, and Hashem answered his prayers, and therefore Shem Elokei Yaakov means that the same God who in his midos, or in that how he was representing himself in that at that time with Yaakov, is the same one who will answer our prayers in our distress. So that's Reish Lakish's in this medrash. Why is Shem Elokei Yaakov? He goes weiter. Says Kain Ksiv Yaakov Kel Ana Osib Yom Sarasi. Right. This is that Hashem answered me in the time of my distress. The pasuk. I don't remember where that is, where he says that. But anyway, let's keep going. Right. So that's what David is saying, that just like Yaakov was answered, so too we will be answered. Okay. Let's keep going. So now there's also a Gemara in Brachos that brings in and talks about this same idea. So let's take a look at that. We'll look at the Rashi there, and then we'll look at the Maharsha as well. Again, it's on this same point. So it says, Vamar Rabbi Avin Halevi. This is right at the end of Maseches Brachos. This is, My dechsiv Yanach Hashem b'yom Sara, Yisagev Hashem Elokei Yaakov. So Elokei Yaakov, Velo, Elokei Avraham Yitzchak. Why again is it singling out? So the Gemara asks the same question. Why is it singling out Yaakov and not Avraham and Yitzchak? So the Gemara gives a bit of an esoteric, maybe a difficult answer. We don't to understand. He says, Mikan labal hakora sheikanes be'avya shel hakora. So from here we learn that the one who is master, the one who owns, one who's master over the beam, that he sort of takes the thickest part of the beam in order to sort of strengthen it, or maybe to carry it, to deal with it. But to understand, what does that mean exactly? So Rashi says, So Rashi says, if you have to schlep it, right, from one place to another, Lasita Babinian, right, to move it, from one place to get it into the house or the building that you're building, you have to carry it from the thickest part, right? I guess to get the right leverage. Maybe that's what it's trying to say. So Klomer Yaakov Shekol Habanim Shalo, right? We're all Bnei Yisrael, all of us, not all, Bnei Yitzchak and Bnei Avraham included others besides Bnei Yisrael, but we are all Bnei Yaakov, Bnei Yisrael. So he was the one who was always entering himself into the thickest part of the beam to keep it strong. So therefore, he's the one that we go back to when we need rachamim as well. So we talk about Elokei Yaakov in that respect. Okay, so that's what Rashi says. Now the Maharsha has an issue with that, and he says, "Berish Rashi, Klomar, Yaakov Shika." So it says, "Bikesh alei berachamim adkan lashodo." So it's here it goes. Shekol abanim shelo. Right here it goes. Shekol abanim shelo bikesh alei berachamim. Okay, so it's just quoting the last part of the Rashi adkan lashono. V'hu dachuk. He has a problem with that. Daha Elokei Yaakov ksiv v'lo shayach be bakashas rachamim. What we're talking about, and I think what the Maharsha is saying is, we're not talking about what Yaakov did specifically. What we're talking about is that this is Elokei Yaakov, right? That why are we attributing the God of Yaakov versus the God of? We're not necessarily talking about what Yaakov he himself did in his lifetime, and that seems to be his question or his issue with Rashi. So it says V'nir lefaresh de Elokei Yaakov rotze lomar. What does that mean? Midaso shel Yaakov yisagevcha b'yom Sarah. That the midah of Yaakov was that he is strengthened, and he was strengthened through HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Hashem answered him, but that made Yaakov what he is. It strengthened him. It made him even a greater person, a greater Eved Hashem, b'yom Sarah, in his time of distress. Dahainu ba'ovei hakoret. That the time of distress, that's the thickest part of the beam in this mashal. Shehu makam koved maso, because that's the heaviest part. And because what we're saying is that Yaakov in his distress, that in his tzara, he was answered. So too, that's the same midah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we are going to be davening to, that should also answer us. So it's not so much about Yaakov, it's more about how HaKadosh Baruch Hu answered Yaakov's prayers, at the most difficult times in his life. That seems to be how the Maharsha understands why it's Shem Elokei Yaakov versus Avram and Yitzchak. All right. So is that good? All right. So I thought we would finish up with the Aruch HaShulchan, so maybe we'll be able to actually get through this all in the allotted time. So the Aruch HaShulchan, and we'll start a little bit behind just because he says some interesting things. The Aruch HaShulchan really does sort of give us some interesting insights in davening at times. So he says, "V'achar chetzi kadesh yomru ashrei." So again, talking about where we are in davening. So we're after on a non-Monday or Thursday, right? We say chetzi kadesh. Actually, sorry, we've tachanun chetzi kadesh, right? And then there's no Torah reading. If there's Torah reading. But if not, right, we just go into ashrei. Okay. So ashrei lamnatseach uvalatzion v'ata kadosh. Okay, v'atami ashrei. Mishum damrinan reish brachos kol mer Tehilim LeDavid shalosh pa'amim b'chol yom muftach lo shehu ben ha'olam haba. Right. So we know we say ashrei 3 times a day because the Gemara in Brachos tells us that if we do that, we are certain that we will be a ben olam haba. Therefore, it was metaken that we would say it in Shachris twice. Echad kodem at tefillah, once we say Psukkah D'Zimra before Shemona Esrei, v'echad la'achar tefillah, once after. But b'mincha pam achas kodem tefillah. In mincha time, right, we also say it right before Shemona Esrei. The keshem she b'shachris yesh shnei kedushos levad kedusha de yotzer. So now he's going to talk about why Ashrei is in the place that it's in. He says that the Ashreis are against the, keneged the kedushos that we say, and he says there's 2 of them in Shacharis. Really, there's 3. But the kedusha of Yotzer Or, where we go through the bit of kedusha there too, says that's not a real kedusha sheinu ela sipor. We're sort of telling over malachim omrim kedusha. There we're simply telling over how the malachim did kedusha. But the 2 real kedushas are in Shemona Esrei, where we ourselves, right, do it responsively and stand up and all that. That's that, so that we have an ashrei there, and then we have an ashrei and right before uvalatzion, where we have the second kedusha. Ubemincha yesh kedusha achas, right? Mincha we also have kedusha in Shemona Esrei. So tiknu pam achas ashrei. Uba arvis leka kedusha, but in arvis there's no kedusha, lo tiknu klal. So therefore there's no ashrei. Okay, so now we're again, it's a bit of an insight that ashrei and kedusha seem to be going hand in hand. The gam ba'ashrei. Why is that? The gam ba'ashrei yesh kedusha shel hakadosh baruch hu. There's a certain kedusha of in ashrei. What does that mean? Kedechsev aramimcha. We are uplifter. We uplift hakadosh baruch hu, right? In the word aramimcha b'chol yom abarcheka gado Hashem dor ledor hadar kavodecha ve'ezuz norasecha. So we're going through ashrei and we're saying and we're relating all of these. All these different aspects of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whether it's his greatness, it's his strength, his splendor. So all of those seem to be, according to the Aruch HaShulchan, a sort of like a kedusha as well. So the Harashahu Yisbarach Miromim I'll call Baracha Utehila, and this teaches us that Hashem is above all brachos and praises. Shazehu inyan kadosh kadosh. So when we say kadosh kadosh kadosh, what we're really saying is that we have an idea of what kedusha is, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu is way above any idea of kedusha that we have. Klamar kadosh muvdal mikol broi mala, that he is separate from any other creation, even the lofty creations like the malachim. And certainly even more so from us, that are on earth. But even so, right, even though Hashem is so lofty and is so far removed from anything else, even the malachim, but at the same time, the entire world is filled with his glory. Right, because Baruch Hu is still with us, down here. Klomar, afshehu kadosh moved on mikom makom melocha la'aretz kavado kamo kain ba'ashrei. Ashrei has an analog to that. Sheim kol godol gedulaso hu chanin v'rachum. That even with his greatness, right, that we talk about, but we also say he's a chanin v'rachum. He's always merciful with us. And he's not midas adin with us. V'tov lakol v'racham avakol masa ve'inechol elav yisaberu Right, all those things that he gives to us shows us that he is very much with us in the world, but yet he is also extremely lofty. So, so right where you see that same place that you see the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we also see his humility, that he is also very much engaged with us, even in our, in our limited capacity, etc. That he humbles us. He humbles himself in front of us. So Aruch HaShulchan is explaining why Ashrei is sort of connected this idea of kedusha, which is I think it's such a novel approach, but it's such a it's a beautiful insight into our davening. So Uri, we're sort of at the latter stages. We're looking at the Aruch HaShulchan on that he's about to get into Lam Natsech, but before he did, he talked about the Ashrei as well.
But by kedusha, he means this sentence, Kadosh, 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 Hashem Tzavakos.
Right.
Saying that sentence, which is twice in Shacharis.
Once
during kedusha and once during right after Yishtabach.
Oh, so all right. So good question. So he's saying it's actually 3 times in Shacharis, right? That we say it right after Yotzer Or, but he says that's not a real kedusha. That's just us relating.
You're right.
Yeah. The one in Yotzer Or is just relating the story. Right. We're relating how the Malach. I think that the Zohar says that, like that there's a Zohar that says that that the Malachim would say Baruch Hu, and then they would start to relate kedusha, and that's why we do Baruch Hu and we relate it. So we're sort of relating what they do, but it's just a story. It's sort of just relating. It's not a real kedusha. But then in kedusha in Shemona Esrei and the Chazar Sashatz, and then again in Valitziya, and we have a real kedusha, and we have Ashrei Keneged those, and also by Mincha we have kedusha in Chazar Sashatz. So again, we have an Ashrei that starts us off. But then he says. So now in Ashrei, at the end of Ashrei, we say Posech Yodecha, which is us saying, "Hey Hashem, you ultimately, you alone are responsible for our parnasa." So the Aruch HaShulchan tells us that's why we say Yancha B'Yom Tzara. Now remember, this is a little bit different than what we saw before. I'm just going to jump up for Uri's benefit as well. We saw this last time around when we talked about Lam Natseach, this medrash where it says, why do we say the Lam Natseach Mizmor LeDavid Yancha Hashem B'Yom Tzara? Why do we say that after we finish Shemona Esrei? So he says that this is Amar Reb Shimon. He says that this is after 18 Kapitlach, and again, this is after 19 for us, but maybe their count was a little bit different. They may have, maybe we split up the Kapitlach a little bit differently than they did. But after the 18, then we say Yancha Hashem B'Yom Tzara, which is very similar to Heinom Rimlo Tisanet Slosecha, because your friends, after you daven, your friends should come up to you and say Tisanet Slosecha, your davening should be answered. So too, we say the kapitel of Yancha Hashem B'Yom Tzara, that Hashem should answer you. And again, very similar to what we say in our full Kaddish of Tiskabel Tzalason Uvason, that our prayers should be answered. So that's how we understood it the last time we looked at this in a previous Chabura, that we say Yancha Hashem B'Yom Tzara at this point because we're saying our prayers should be answered, what we davened in Shemona Esrei. But the Aruch HaShulchan has a different approach. Sorry.
Jeff, quickly. Last week we finished with the scene was that we didn't trust that Hashem can be down with us. That there's 2 approaches. We're demanding water because we don't believe he can do the miracles, or we're demanding water because we don't believe he can be down with us here.
And right, now, he's not interested in us. Yeah.
This is absolutely the contrast. We're saying you make great miracles, but you also do miracles to us, which is
right.
Very beautiful.
Right, beautiful. You're right. It connects directly with with what Rav Yerucham was saying. Exactly. That those who believe, there's that idea, right? There's who believe that there's a God, but God sort of put things in motion and then he walks away, right? That's what Rav Yerucham was saying. No. Don't fall into that trap. That Hashem's, and you're right. This is the Aruch HaShulchan is saying the same thing. That's the Anvada Sanusa of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is that yes, he's so lofty, he's up there in the highest realms, but no, he's very much engaged with us down here as well. So absolutely. But but the Aruch HaShulchan is going to say something a little bit different now. So he says, why do we say Yancha Yom Sorry? He says, K'mo Shamru B'Shel Berachos Lamaksiv Yasagevcha Hashem Elokei Yaakov Lo Avram Yitzchak, and he's tying this into what we just saw the Gemara in Brachos that said why in that pasuk. So I'm just going to show you the pasuk real quick. Uri, so the pasuk says Yasagevcha Hashem Elokei Yaakov. So we say that in this kapitel, we say that Hashem will answer your prayers, but when we talk about Hashem, we say Shem Elokei Yaakov. So why is it Elokei Yaakov? But what happened to Avraham and Yitzchak? Usually we include Avraham and Yitzchak. So the Gemara in Brachos asked that question. We saw it. We started a little bit early, and you didn't see that piece, but here he's quoting it. It says Mikan lebala koresh yikanis beuvia shel kore perish Rashi ba letotel hakore mamakum lamakum klomar Yaakov shekol banim shelo v'torach begidulam. He says Yaakov put everything into it. He was the one who was sort of holding the beam up, the one main beam that holds up the house at the thickest part. That was Yaakov Avinu, who put a shoulder into it. That's how Rashi understands this Gemara. That he put everything he had to into, he says, v'torach begidulam, that when it came to his children, the Shvatim, the 12 tribes, Yaakov had a lot of tsaros, and that's what he was doing. He was constantly looking after and davening for his children, for Bnei Yisrael. So Yivakesh Alem Rachamim, he was always mevakesh for them Rachamim. Ad kan l'shono the Yaakov haya lo tsar gido bane v'torach leparnasam. So he's going in Rashi that was Yaakov. Yaakov was all about tsar gido banim. He had a lot of tsaros with his children. V'gia lo tsaros rabos me'esav Lavan, right? If you think about all the tsaros, Esav, Lavan, Hakadosh Baruch Hu chotzim mikulim, but the Hakadosh Baruch Hu saved him. And he will also save us from our own problems. When Hakadosh Baruch Hu says, when the time that they have tsaros and Bnei Yisrael come and ask mercy from me, I will answer them. And I will be there. I'm with them in their tzara. And that's the end of the kapitel that we're talking about, which is the king will answer us in the time that we call. That's what Hakadosh Baruch Hu is saying. I'm with you. I will answer you as soon as you call me. Now he gets into a bit of a gematria as well, to sort of tie it together. Let's just see. So just want to finish this off. But what's interesting is that he seems to be saying, just want to, maybe just end with this one bit. The so the Aruch HaShulchan seems to be understanding that we say Lam Natseach really because we go from Pasech HaShodech where we ask for Parnasa, and Yancha Hashem B'Yom Tzara is also going in Parnasa. Interestingly enough, so that's why we say it. Interestingly enough, many days that we don't say Lam Natseach, like on Rosh Chodesh, it's because we're also supposed to be Memayit or Chol Moed, because we're supposed to reduce how much malach we do, how much work we're doing, and therefore we don't say Lam Natseach. It seems to be going with what the Aruch HaShulchan is saying, that it's all about Parnasa. If we're reducing how much Parnasa we're working for, we don't say Lam Natseach. So, just hopefully that gives us a little bit more insight into when we're saying Lam Natseach, almost on a daily basis, a little bit more insight as to why we're saying it and what's the story behind it.